Wow, it has been incredible to see over the past few days that Patty Jenkins has Rian Johnsoned herself. Oh my God, it's happened again. And we're going to go over the ghost of Rian Johnson so that maybe Patty Jenkins can stop this transformation midway. So here's what gets even more interesting. It was for the exact same reason, subverting expectations. Fans expected a true sequel to the 2017 film. And as I said in my review, Wonder Woman 1984 is so different, it gives you whiplash. And a lot of people are litigious. I think that one thing that's been made clear here is that even if the filmmaker has the best of intentions, Rian Johnson got pretty aggressive. So I don't know if he had the best of intentions. But let's even assume that he did. But I think it's pretty clear at this point that people don't like to be surprised with their favorite properties. I mean, you can put surprises in the mix, but overall, you shouldn't just pull the rug out from underneath them. And that's what really happened in both cases. Now, again, as I said, Johnson subverted expectations intentionally. He definitely, his heart might have been in the right place, but he thought that was a good creative approach. He was like, oh, you guys are going to love it. And nobody, I liked The Last Jedi, but just as the same situation here, you can't deny the overall reaction. And that's a big part of business. This is it's show business. And, this can't be ignored. Same situation. So Jenkins, though, I think this was unintentional. I think that, I don't think she was like, oh, I'm going to surprise everyone. I think that a couple of things happened, which we're going to go over. I think that to sum it up, though, I think perhaps she bought into her own hype a bit too much off of the first film, didn't give enough credit to the rest of the people working on that first film for what they might have contributed. I think she only saw them as obstacles. I think she probably felt she could have delivered something even better if she had been not interfered with. And now that has been disproven. I hope she realizes that. And here's the big one. Simply not understanding the fan community. I think a lot of filmmakers don't get the fan community. But I think that now after Rian Johnson and Patty Jenkins, what I just pointed out is clear. You got to deliver what people are expecting. And I think the surprise has to be the sprinkles, not the ice cream on the sundae. All right, so on the first Wonder Woman, Patty Jenkins was working with Warner Brothers and Zack Snyder's people extensively. And from what I've heard, they didn't always see eye to eye. But that friction, I think, created a really great, very unique, and very well-balanced film that, people really enjoyed. Now, on Wonder Woman 1984, even though the Snyders are still producers, Warner Brothers gave Patty Jenkins complete creative control, as she's made very clear in her interviews, before the Rotten Tomatoes score dropped. Oh, that's another lesson to be learned here. Don't give interviews or do a victory lap until you have your final Rotten Tomatoes score, because as I'm going to show you, she's just made a problem for herself even worse by some of the comments that she's made in the last few weeks. But she cleaned house when she made the film to better create her vision. And I've said, this movie's been coming out for like 2 years now. I've made videos talking about how I felt these changes were a mistake. So two of the biggest ones that really were big mistakes was that she got rid of Zack Snyder's stunt team and his VFX people. And she also got rid of screenwriter Alan Heinberg. Oh, that was a huge mistake. Those two things were horrible. Alan Heinberg not only came up with the Disney princess angle for the first film, brilliant, but he actually wrote Wonder Woman comics. He's an extensive comic book writer, and that was one of the titles he worked on. He also created the Young Avengers. And he's not being, no one's checking with him on that property over at Marvel. Don't do this. Don't go down this path, Marvel. You could call these comic book people up. Comic book people, especially because the comic book business is having problems, they're not that busy. All right, so anyway, instead, Jenkins doubled down on Geoff Johns, who, to be fair, I think has zeroed in on Patty Jenkins as his only remaining connection to DC Films, as everyone else abandoned him. He got fired as being the head of DC Films. Everyone else was like, get out of here. But he had already sunk his hooks into Patty Jenkins, and she felt that he was her safety net, erroneously, that he would be her safety net of making sure this stuff was comics accurate. She should have picked up the comics herself, and she would have seen that they were really not following the source material. But I think she felt that if Geoff Johns felt it was a good idea, it was a good idea. That's incredible to me. But I think we have to be fair to Patty Jenkins. We have to keep in mind that this movie was made a long time ago. It's been in the can. It had to go through reshoots. So I don't think that anyone I knew, but very few people knew how bad Geoff Johns was at the time that they really were making Wonder Woman 1984. And despite his extensive work at DC Comics, where, again, to be fair, Geoff Johns was very successful. He was very successful as a comic book writer. That's how he got moved up to the movies. They were like, oh, you're so good at writing the comics. I'm sure you could help us with the movies. Oh my God, fast forward. He did not. In fact, well, I've talked about this many times, but I just have to add it in. He's a very selfish individual who only pushed his own comic book stories because you get more money if your stories, sell and are based on the films. It was very bad, but he might be a bad business person, but he's a good comic book writer with some characters. He got Green Lantern. He really got Green Lantern. He gets the Flash. I thought his take on Batman was pretty interesting. His Earth 1 Batman. But just because you get some characters doesn't mean you get them all. And Geoff Johns has never written a Wonder Woman comic. So it's incredible that, I think this underlines how little Patty Jenkins knows about comic books. It's a little bit like how Margot Robbie was able to be taken in on comic books when she was being advised for Birds of Prey. I think that, I would really advise anybody who is an actor or a writer, or an actor or a director, to look into the comic book properties themselves rather than taking someone else's word for it. Look into the comic book property yourself, and also look into the fandom and find out what the fans generally like instead of trusting someone else that they know what's going on. So anyway, Jenkins could have consulted some of the most popular Wonder Woman comic book writers of all time that are still around today. There's Greg Rucka, who recently just updated Wonder Woman for DC Rebirth, brilliantly so. His Cheetah origin story was so good. And there's also George Perez and Phil Jimenez. These guys are all around, and you could consult them. And she had Alan Heinberg, but she threw Alan Heinberg away. And as long as we're talking about comics, I think it is worth noting, some of you pointed out that Wonder Woman 1984 doesn't follow any of the source material. Its origin for Cheetah is totally off, and Maxwell Lord is basically a different character. They couldn't do the neck snap thing because they already did the neck snap thing in Man of Steel, which they stole from Wonder Woman, which annoyed me a little bit. But you can't do that again, especially when the neck snap was so poorly received in Man of Steel. So it's really hard to do the Maxwell Lord story when the biggest thing that people remember it for is you can't use it. Although I liked what they did with Maxwell Lord, but as you can see, a lot of people did not care for it, or it wasn't enough to save the movie in their opinion. Wonder Woman 1984 also focuses heavily on Richard Donner's Superman and the Linda Carter TV series, which, by the way, both came out in the 70s and not the 80s. So why not call it Wonder Woman 1970-something if you're going to have those as inspiration? But the problem there is that style isn't popular anymore. Frank Miller made comics darker in the mid-80s, and Zack Snyder, interestingly enough, made comic book movies darker based on Miller's work. Isn't that interesting how that works out? Bryan Singer and Christopher Nolan also contributed to making comic book movies darker. And while Marvel movies are brighter, and they're getting a little darker though, but when it comes to DC, some of the darkest stuff happened in Endgame, and it's the most successful movie of all time, period, of all movies. But when it comes to DC, fans still clearly prefer the darker, realistic treatment. Aquaman, I loved Aquaman, and that made $1 billion. But I gotta say, nobody ever gives it any credit, and nobody even remembers that it made $1 billion, which is weird. I hope Aquaman 2 is good. James Wan is a really good filmmaker. I think he does his research. Aquaman, to me, was a little dark. I think the casting, which Zack Snyder did of Jason Momoa, makes that character more of the Frank Miller, takes it down the Frank Miller path, and it's turned out to be very good. Amber Heard's a real problem for that, though. All right, so anyway. Now, blockbuster filmmaking is a team effort to better ensure mass appeal. It's a system of checks and balances. So here's yet more proof that giving a director creative carte blanche on a blockbuster is a really bad idea. And speaking of Rian Johnson, What has created a huge problem for the Star Wars franchise is not just his creative decisions on The Last Jedi, but that Lucasfilm not only didn't listen to the criticism, but dismissed it as trolling and was actually quite aggressive. I haven't seen that from DC just yet, but I worry that it's going to go in that direction. Now, there's always an element of trolling to criticism, and trolling can be quite cruel, but that doesn't mean that the criticism at the heart of it isn't valid. For instance, I took a poll about your thoughts on Wonder Woman 1984. Like, people still say The Last Jedi was like, oh, Star Wars fans were so mean, and some Star Wars fans were ridiculously mean, but that doesn't mean that their criticism was wrong. I think it's important, because remember, don't take it personally. It's show business. I think you got to strip away the cruelty and be like, but what is being said here? And then see if there's any validity to that. And I think there was. Don't trash Luke Skywalker. All right, so anyway, on Wonder Woman 1984, I took a poll of your thoughts, and there are two ways to look at this poll. Yes, 62% of people enjoyed the film. That's fabulous. But you would be wrong to not realize this poll also points out that 68% feel it has problems. That's a problem. On Sunday, Warner Brothers said that Patty Jenkins would return to conclude her trilogy, which means they're only going to let her make one more. But I would also like to point out that Lucasfilm at the time backed up Rian Johnson by doing the same thing. They said, we're going to give him a whole trilogy. And we have yet to see it. So let's see what happens with Patty Jenkins. If she does get to return, and as she gets ready to join Star Wars herself, with fans already less enthused about that after seeing Wonder Woman 1984, here's hoping again she doesn't dismiss the legit criticism. And let's break that criticism down. I've stripped away the hate, and here's what I think needs to be taken away from the reaction to Wonder Woman 1984. There's a lot of it. All right. The story. A lot of you have told me you just don't care for the script, from deviating from the source material to the bigger focus on Maxwell Lord instead of Wonder Woman herself, to wasting an iconic Wonder Woman villain like Cheetah. So the lesson here is pick your screenwriter or co-writer, as Patty Jenkins herself co-wrote Wonder Woman 1984 along with Johns and David Callahan. David Callahan, by the way, is the sole writer on the upcoming Shang-Chi and Spider-Verse 2 movies. Oh my God! So we'll see if he was the problem or if it was all Jenkins and Johns. But there have been other problematic screenwriters recently. We've had Chris Terrio. He's been an issue. There's Christina Hodson at Birds of Prey. But yet Warner Brothers and other studios keep hiring these writers for more franchise work. It's a little bit like Julie Taymor's Spider-Man Broadway musical. I also thought that was interesting. But the clear thing here is that every time you have talent come in here to do these projects who don't like comic books. Maybe they don't. I'm not saying they hate them, but they're not their cup of tea. But they come in and they say, oh, you know what? You know what interests me about this character? Changing them, reinventing them into something I do care about. And that is proven to be a horrible idea. So they need to stop doing that. They need to stop hiring screenwriters who are going to put an interesting twist on it. Todd Phillips did that to Joker, although that was very divisive as well. I thought that was brilliant. In that case, because it had the darker, more realistic tone, I think people were more interested to see what path Phillips took them down. Maybe if this movie had just been really dark and angry with better action, although there's no action in Joker, although the third act is so important, and Joker nails the third act, and I think Patty Jenkins really messed up the third act here by having a conversation instead of a fight. And also, I think the powers were hard to follow, which is also the script's problem, Maxwell Lord's powers. Kevin Feige loves Marvel, just the way it is. He also loves Star Wars, by the way, and is supposedly supposed to be moving over there at some point. Although speaking of Star Wars, Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni love Star Wars exactly as it is. And that love has been imperative to their success. They got to get some people working over at DC who like the source material as it is. Matt Reeves seems to really like Batman, or at least get Batman, and that's promising. Next, the cartoonish tone was an issue for a lot of people. Now, again, some people look at comic books and think that they are cartoonish, which is a mistake. I believe Jenkins put too much faith in nostalgia for the Linda Carter TV series. I'm like, people also fondly remember Adam West's Batman, but just try and take that approach to a Batman movie. People would be equally as upset. Jenkins herself said in a recent interview that Warner Brothers was worried about the tone when she showed them the dailies, and she told the studio to trust her. Her hubris to get the credit for the movie for that choice created a situation where she now has full ownership of a creative choice that is hated by a lot of people. Again, don't take ownership of things until you're totally sure if they're successful. Then you'd be like, oh yeah, we all chose that and it was unfortunate. And hope that your studio and coworkers don't throw you under the bus, being like, no, Patty, we told you this was bad. Then there's the lack of action. I pointed out in my own review of the film that I felt that was a mistake. And I felt that replacing a big fight in the third act with a speech was really risky, and it turned out to be really risky. Jenkins again here shot herself in the foot once more, recently revealing that it was Warner Brothers who had insisted on a big third act fight in the 2017 film, which she reluctantly delivered. She wanted to have no action in the third act the first time around, but she was overruled. See how that tension made things work out a little bit better. But when you hear that story, it makes you feel that maybe that third act fight could have been better if Patty Jenkins wasn't so upset about having to add it to the movie. And again, she takes full ownership of a creative decision, not only with the new movie, but also on that original one that has been very poorly received. You're like, oh no, this lack of action decision was your fault. And then also now it seems it was your fault that the third act fight wasn't very good in the 2017 movie. That's weird. I don't know why she would have done that. Furthermore, Jenkins decided to not only make Wonder Woman only play defense in her fighting, but taking away her sword and shield, which we all felt was a mistake as soon as we heard about it, but also making Wonder Woman losing her powers for a good chunk of the film, so she's weaker. Audiences have made it super clear in their response to Wonder Woman 1984 that they want to see a Wonder Woman who is a skilled and aggressive warrior. I think that is a huge takeaway from the criticism. That should be front and center on any future appearances of Wonder Woman. And then there's the way Steve Trevor is brought back, which will haunt Patty Jenkins forever. As I reported to you a long time ago, Patty Jenkins got the idea that it would be clever to reference the movie Heaven Can Wait, which nobody remembers, much less remembers fondly. I don't know why she wanted to reference this, but she really got it in her head that she wanted to do this. Just like I heard she fell in love with the idea of Wonder Woman lassoing the wind instead of outright flying, even though everybody in the room told her that also wasn't a great idea. And she got rid of everybody in the room. All right, so anyway, in Heaven Can Wait, Warren Beatty comes back from the dead in the body of a man who's been murdered, which is part of this story. They're like, oh my God, we thought we killed him, but he's back. It's an okay movie. But here, though, Steve borrows the body of a man who's still very much alive. And Wonder Woman not only doesn't question what happened to the guy who was using this body before, but then she has sex with his body. This is bad. Some people were very upset about this, not just because of what actually happened, but because it's hypocritical. That's really, I think, what's making people particularly upset about it. If the genders were reversed, the internet would explode at this story point. But the fact that the internet is not exploding seems unfair because it is unfair. I mean, I think that you have to give that to people. It's not good. I don't know if Patty Jenkins will ever be able to make a public appearance again where this isn't brought up. And on this one, she probably should either apologize or at least explain her thinking and acknowledge it didn't quite work out. I can't believe that nobody on her team or at the studio or Gal Gadot or Chris Pine realized how bad this idea was. I mean, the character doesn't even have a name. He's just called Handsome Man. I've seen some funny comments from people being like, justice for Handsome Man. I mean, that just objectifies him further, and the body swap didn't even add anything to the story. If you called the female character Hot Woman and just borrowed her body, people would be up in an uproar. So it is hypocritical. Finally, a number of people, including some of you who've tweeted me about this, have found the depiction of the Middle East and the Arab characters offensive. So much so that I really feel that Patty Jenkins, Gal Gadot, and Paramount, who are making the movie, should rethink whether or not they want to do a Cleopatra film. I think that this might be just the tip of the iceberg in terms of a fan reaction. So while I enjoyed Wonder Woman 1984, I realized the risks that it took. I really enjoyed it from an artistic perspective. But those risks clearly did not work out. And I felt that the film flat out made mistakes, like the lack of action in the Steve Trevor thing. I think that's just become clear. Here's hoping that DC doesn't follow Star Wars down the rabbit hole of fighting with fans or ignoring them, something that Star Wars still has yet to recover from. Rian Johnson's fine, just he's going to start making Knives Out movies now, but Star Wars will always haunt him. And going forward, I hate to see talent reluctant to join DC just like they're reluctant to join Star Wars, because you don't know if fans will love or hate what you do, because you have talent coming in here that's not fans of the work, and they don't have a strong guiding force like Kevin Feige as a safety net. I think the Disney Plus shows are also, the Star Wars Disney Plus shows are thriving because talent there feels at least they have Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni to watch out for them. And with the movies, it's really a crapshoot as to I'm worried about Taika Waititi. I don't know he did so well on his Mandalorian episodes, but I do have a concern. Maybe Kevin Feige will produce his film. You need someone backing you up who's really a fan of the material. So what do you think? Should Patty Jenkins continue with Wonder Woman? And what lessons do you think she should take from the response to Wonder Woman 1984? And how can DC and Star Wars better serve and protect their directors? Share your thoughts down below, subscribe today, and of course, as always, you can check out some more videos right now.